Natalie was coming back home from a long day at work, but that night she decided to try something different. She pulled over so she could hold her phone in her hands. And after 4 minutes, her phone rang. She knew it would. That was the part she hadn't expected. She'd driven 3 blocks from her usual route to find out how long it would take for the phone to ring. She let the phone ring twice. "Hey, are you okay? I can't see you on the app." He didn't sound angry, he sounded worried, in the way someone sounds when they genuinely care about whether you got home safely. She told him she was almost there, turned the location back on, and drove the rest of the way in silence. At a red light 2 streets from home, something occurred to her that she couldn't quite hold on to. For months, she'd been adjusting her routes, texting arrival times before he asked, quietly sidestepping conversations she didn't want to have. She hadn't thought it was anything. It had become normal for her. The cage doesn't need a lock if the bird has already stopped flying to the edges. They'd been together about 3 months when Daniel suggested it. The way Natalie remembers it, she'd been at a work event that ran late. By the time she got home, he'd called twice. The next day, he showed her the app. "Let's share our locations." "So I know you're okay," he said. "You can also see where I am." So she said yes, because it made sense. He just wants to protect me, she thought. What Daniel never said is that he had other reasons. 3 years before meeting Natalie, someone left him without saying a word. That person left and kept complete silence for over 4 days. He didn't know if she was okay. He didn't know anything, really. For him, not knowing what happened was worse than knowing the relationship had ended. The app gave him comfort. It meant he wouldn't have to sit in that silence again. In this way, he convinced himself that using the app was practical because it allowed both of them to see each other's locations, not just him tracking her. That part was true, it just wasn't the whole thing. Over the next 18 months, 2 things happened at the same time. Neither of them noticed either one. Natalie started to change small things. For example, she had to switch gyms because her old one was far from her new office. She just didn't want to answer so many questions about why she was in that part of town. She avoided going out for dinner with colleagues because she didn't want to have the awkward conversation with Daniel. She sent text messages about every step she took. She stopped taking the long way home. She loved the long way home. Daniel rarely opened the app deliberately. It was more that it sat there, and sometimes when her location hadn't moved or she mentioned someone he hadn't heard of, he'd look. The looking settled something. He didn't have a better word for it. He never thought of it as surveillance. He thought of it as not wanting to lose her. The problem is that from where she was standing, those 2 things felt the same. She didn't plan any of this as a confrontation. She turned off her location and waited to see what would happen. While she was waiting, she didn't think he is controlling. That word felt too strong for the man she loved. He was watching her constantly, mostly when he was anxious, but that tended to happen a lot. And she had rebuilt her whole life around that, around his insecurities, without even realizing when it all started. That's the thing about this kind of pattern. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly becomes the shape of your days. There is a name for what Natalie went through, but most people don't know it. Researchers refer to it as digital coercive control. Technology comes into a relationship, usually with permission and usually called care, and then it starts to change what a partner does, where they go, what they avoid. Without making any demands, people move around the monitoring without even realizing they're doing it. In 2025, research confirmed what most people already knew. You don't have to monitor all the time for the effect to stay the same. It's enough to know that someone might be watching you. And Daniel's side of this is in the research too, which is the part that makes the story complicated. Research has found that partner surveillance is directly linked to attachment anxiety, which is the fear of being abandoned. People who carry that fear reach for whatever helps them deal with the unknown. He wasn't lying when he said it was for her safety. He believed it. He just never considered whether the arrangement was addressing her fear or his own. Natalie told him, the test, the street, the 31 minutes. Daniel was hurt. He said he barely looked at it. He said he just wanted to know she was safe. She believed him, but it didn't change anything she now understood. She had stopped taking the long way home. She had canceled on someone she wanted to see. She had chosen routes based on what she could explain rather than where she actually wanted to go. And she'd done all of it inside something that from the outside looked like a normal, loving relationship. They tried for a while. They went to counseling sessions. Daniel sent her an article about anxious attachment with a note that said he was working on it, and she believed him. She eventually moved out. The first Saturday after she moved out, a friend asked if she wanted to go to a farmer's market across the city. Longer route. No real reason to go that way, but she did. She was already on the road when she noticed she'd taken the long way, past the park she'd walked through since she was a student, through streets with no particular logic to them. No logic except that she felt like it. And then she realized what she had gained back. The freedom to do ordinary things without calculating if she could explain them.